you're talking about is progressive identity, right? And what you're talking about is progressing away from sort of the comforts of the system and comforts of the old structure into something that's equitable, fair, and produces actual positive outcomes, right? That produces the type of outcomes that have that we get, Black people in, or Black managers and Black coaches, and not necessarily saying that they're given these opportunities, but at least there's a possibility, right? Because right now we know that that's not what's happening, right? There's a very, very tough process of getting, like you said, getting in these circles and getting in these conversations to get jobs. So we understand that, but we're talking about progress. So how important are these progressive ideas and progressive views? And as a society, I know we've got the idea of progress, but I've often felt, and I think you mentioned this a bit earlier, sports is sometimes the best arena for these things to sort of find their way, right? As it was with integration. So how important is it for us to push sort of these progressive ideas, these progressive thoughts in sports as a way, as an example, as sports has been in the past?
Yeah, it's really important, and then sometimes it feels unimportant. And when I say it's really important, it's because this is the way, right? I mean, what's the option? What options do we have? But the reason why the book is titled Full Dissidence is because at some point I'm like, they don't want us in the game. Right. I mean, so what do you do? Like I talk about having that sort of full dissidence moment. What do you do when you realize, okay, we've done everything you've asked us to do? Played the game at a high level, went to the colleges you told us to go to, did all the things you asked, and there's still no pipeline.
Right.
And at the same time, held back all of the different positions and thoughts and feelings, so we didn't offend anybody either. So we didn't even get a chance to be ourselves, and still don't have the opportunity. It's like on the one hand, you say to yourself, okay, what do we have to do? The other hand, you also recognize, okay, what do you want? Do you want diversity of color, or do you want diversity of thought? I always felt that what they really want is diversity of color. You want to have a lot of people who look differently, who think the same. Because when you think the same, you're not affecting the order. You're not upsetting the order. Right. You're not challenging anyone to do anything differently. And yet you can also tout progress because there's a bunch of people in the room who all came from different backgrounds. Right. So I think it's a matter of the level of honesty that we have in terms of what's the actual outcome, what's the goal. And a lot of this conversation has been fantastic, because one of the things that the biggest thing that I hear from this conversation is structural change. Do we actually want structural change? I mean, this is the wheelhouse of what you both are doing. Most times when you get structural changes, because you got to kick the door down. You got to force it. You've got to force this is this is a necessity now. They're not going to give it to you. No one's going to say, you know what, you're right, we should get rid of the draft. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Right.
So, I mean, I've always sort of felt that, I guess one of the things that I've been trying to articulate on this concept is, how many rights do we actually have if we have to keep fighting for them? I mean, where do you really fit if you always have to kick down the door? And so maybe you're just a troublemaker, or maybe you don't have any rights, and maybe those rights have to keep, continuously being reinforced. And that's the sort of natural order of things. It's a really good question. I mean, I feel a retrenchment. I feel more than ever where we are right now. I feel like the rubber is meeting the road. I feel like we're hitting that point where
retrenchment or last gasp.
Both, same thing to me. I mean, how many times, like I got a email from Bob Costas, the text message, and I'm sorry if I'm talking out of school, Bob, but it was a good email. It was a good text. And he was upset about what I had said about Sam Sater today on the show, which I had said, and his point was something along the lines of, I do not believe that the majority of white people in this country feel this way about Donald Trump, that they are tolerant of him, that he is just as repulsive to us as he is to you, and that this is that where we are in this culture, is at a place where there's more in common than you may think. And I thought that was a fine text. I thought it made perfect sense. But it goes back to what we've all been talking about here, about at some point, we have all been guilty of feeling like we could be free while tolerating elements that were against us, right? So we treat these things as differences of opinion, when actually they're really threats. And eventually what ends up happening is that you tolerate the threats to the point where you can't fight the threat anymore. And now you realize you're boxed into a corner. And so what I had said to Bob was, we're in a place right now where we're going to find out what everybody's made of.
Absolutely.
We're gonna find out. Are you, Mike Krzyzewski? Are you really committed to these kids? Are we, or are we really committed to ourselves? You're gonna find out from the Nick Sabans of the world, and you're gonna find out from, what are you really committed to?
Yeah, they've already shown themselves.
Exactly.
One of the coaches last week, right? The comment about his guys being healthy enough to fight the virus, and we
exactly
need to get them back to school so we can generate money. Right.
100%. And so now you start to reach this point where how many more excuses can you make when they're showing you? See, that's one of the things about both the last two books, about the Heritage and Full Dissidence. People came to me and they were like, oh my God, man, really, really good work. Really appreciate it. And I said to them, I didn't do anything. I said, this isn't Watergate. This wasn't Iran-Contra. I didn't have to do any investigating. They're advertising it.
Right. Right.
Nobody sent me some manila envelope with secret documents in here. They're telling exactly what they're doing. And the question is, are you cool with that? It's obvious that you guys aren't. You're doing something about it. You're fighting it, which is what people have been asking someone to do for a really, really long time. And so we're in a place right now, when you talk about retrenchment and last gasp, part of that last gasp is bravado. Stand up and say, this is who it is, come do something about it. It's me driving the lane and you standing in front of the basket, right? What's it gonna be? And I'm pretty sure you don't let people dunk over you if you can help it, right?
Right.
I mean, so that's the battle. I think that's where we are right now. And I think one of the places where I'm at is I feel like there are so many people who still feel like they can lean in and reason and infiltrate. And I just don't know if that's working. I'm pretty sure it doesn't work anymore. I mean, the NCAA has made it very, very, very clear what their position is. I mean, they're not budging. And so eventually at some point, how many more seats at the table do you think you can get to make them change? Eventually, you got to kick the door down.
A couple of things in there. One, we come across this often in what we're doing, where people will say, oh, well, you should get in touch with this person or that person. They've of course said something that would indicate that maybe it would make sense to come together. And I often tell people, I'm not going to use any specifics, but like, people are about a cause until it means they have to be about a cause.
Exactly.
Talk is cheap. Talk is very easy. But actually putting action behind that is an entirely different value proposition to people. And the other thing I would say, that the ability for guys to actually build a team out and be given time, that doesn't happen.
Right, the pressure, right.
Yeah.
Unfounded pressure, right.
Yeah, I think that after the NFL season ended, I think that the black coaches, I don't know if they had their full dissidence moment or not, but they got punched in the face.
Yes.
They realized, they're like, okay, Eric Bieniemy just won the Super Bowl. He didn't get a phone call. I mean, I think that it's this, okay, let's look at the sum total of what we have. We don't have anything. And eventually, at some point, you have to accept. They're telling us something. They're giving us the message right now that we're not welcome, or that they're not going to hire us. So that, I remember 2015, the Toronto Blue Jays won the division and John Gibbons was a manager, and I went to go talk to him. And Gibby used to manage before, and back in 08, 09, I think, with the Blue Jays, he got fired, and then now he's back. Mm-hmm. And so I go in, and I think this is actually 2014, 2015. And I go into his office. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I looked at him, and I was like, Gibby, what are you doing here? Right? What are you doing here? And he said, man, I don't know. He's like, I was mowing my lawn in San Antonio when the phone rang, and Alex Anthopoulos, the GM of the Blue Jays, asked me to manage the club. I was like, so you were mowing the lawn, and now you're about to go to the playoffs?
Wow.
And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, why? Why you? And he said, I think Alex, as a new GM, wanted comfort. And I liked Gibby, and I enjoy Gibby and the whole thing, and I accepted it, and I understood it. But there was a part of me that was thinking, that's all it took?
Right.
We fight and fight for merit. We fight to put the numbers up. We fight to get in the door. We fight with your stupid Rooney rule and your stupid Seelig rule and all these other rules to try to get in front of somebody, and all it took was comfort. So you just made a phone call to a guy mowing his lawn, and he got the job. So these are the battles, right? And if it were me running the club, and I wanted a coach that I thought was gonna, not fight with me every single step of the way, and I needed success, maybe you do the same thing. But we're not in that pipeline. We're not part of it that gets the call when they need comfort.
Right. And when you talk about what message that sends, you had an interview that I heard today, and I wanted to ask you about a point you made. And I know you said the interview was from a few months ago, so I'll try to help refresh your memories of what you said. But you basically answered. You said that the people that you felt bad for, sort of, were the younger generations of people who sort of their awakening was the Obama moment, right?
Yeah.
In the lead up to his presidency, so that whole 2006 and beyond, and then sort of to see where we are now. If you couple that with, like you said, sort of the messaging that we're getting from the professional leagues in terms of their willingness to hire people and hire Black people, hire coaches, hire management people, what is it about that response? What is it that when you look at all of that makes you feel for that generation who sort of found their awakening in that moment and sort of have come to this point in our history where socially we're chaotic? People who were inside sports, there's chaos in sports, like you said, in these different points that we're constantly being sort of educated on, even though we're unwilling to see them and accept the reality of it. What is the impact on that generation?
Yeah, I think that the big thing is, as long as I've been alive, there's only been two ways to talk about race in this country. One is things are better than they used to be, or two is get over it, right? Those are usually the two lanes that we have. Well, it's better than it was. Well, thank goodness for that, right? And so because of that, the argument that we keep hearing, and especially under my generation, we did it. I mean, my family, when we left Boston and grew up into all white Plymouth down South Shore, down by Cape Cod, it's not going to be like this for us. It's not going to be like this for us. And I remember my uncle used to send me these newspaper clippings every time something happened. Circle it. See, it's the same. See. And so for this generation, and you see it on social media, and it used to drive me crazy. A lot of the Black kids out there, the new generation, they're the elites. They're the ones from Dartmouth and Harvard and Cornell, Columbia. They're the ones going on campus and realizing it's the same for them.
Right.
And so for me, it was like everybody, we all had our moments of progress, but we never got the Obama moment. And that generation, when, that night at Grant Park in 2008.
Right.
It's different.
Right.
And then they got punched in the face. They got punched in the face hard. They got punched in the face harder than I think we ever got punched. Because that began the post-racial moment. Right. And look at where we are right now. Look at that gap. I mean, if 2008 was your first time voting, maybe you believed in democracy a little bit more than the rest of us did. You see Jesse Jackson out there crying, maybe we've done something.
Right.
and now look.
Right.
You know, so that's the reason why I feel for them, because maybe they thought they were different, just like we all thought we were different. And you got the elders saying, you ain't different. It's the same. It's the same fight. It's the same battle. And it's no different than, you know, what a lot of my white women friends went through with Brett Kavanaugh. And they watched that Kavanaugh hearing, and it was a gut punch that I don't want to speak for them, but having been around, you know, like I said, we live in the white world, right? Having been enough white women my whole life, I mean, they've gotten punched so hard in the last 3 years, from Kavanaugh to Hillary to Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
And they're having that full dissidence moment where it's like, what do we got to do? And they're looking at it in some ways too. You know, we did everything you told us to do, and you still did this to us. They still got the gut punch.
Right.
And I think that you know, both that young generation that I always feel, you know, I feel for, I wonder what they're going to do with it.
Right. That's the question. Right.
You know, it's like this. It's like that Al Sharpton, Michael Jordan exchange that's in the Heritage. When I'm sitting there with Rev and we're sitting there talking, and you know, he's going on and on about Michael and about how when the shit was hitting, you know, and Michael was the biggest game in town, he never said anything. Where was Michael on this? Where was Michael? Where was Michael? Where was Michael? Right. You know, Michael was in LA during Rodney King. Where was Michael? You know, because the Lakers were playing the Bulls during the finals when that happened.
Right.
What about it? And I said to him, I said, you know, Rev, maybe, just maybe, Michael figured it out better than all of us. That maybe Michael realized that there's not going to be a seat at the table, and that maybe money is as good as it's going to get. So you might as well get as much of it as you can, because that's the one thing that you can have in this country, that you can make money. And Rev looked at me and he said, true, okay, but you're still a coward.
Right.
You know,
right.
It was amazing. It was an amazing exchange.
Wow. Right.